We are delighted to welcome today Vice Prime Minister Husnoo from Mauritius, who's going to speak to us about what's happening on the very important island nation in the Indian Ocean. We are, of course, delighted to host these series of important, short and snappy conversations on the occasion of the Kigali Global Dialogue 2022. And we hope that these sessions will shed some light on important areas, domains, and questions that many of us need to engage with today. Vice Prime Minister Husnoo, welcome to the dialogue. The world is reopening. The pandemic continues to linger, but many of us are now seeing a return to economic activity, social activities. How is Mauritius responding to this new moment post the pandemic? How is life in Mauritius today?
Before the pandemic, we were trying to face the problem of global warming at that particular time. In fact, the last few years, things have changed a lot because with the pandemic, there has been global lockdown everywhere. Mm-hmm. And for a small island state like Mauritius, they depend like Mauritius, the main income earner is tourism. Mm-hmm. So with lockdown in all the countries, so you can imagine what happened. Mm-hmm. The number of tourists coming to Mauritius really dried up. You know what I mean? And apart from that, and then we had the closure of the border. And now when we open October last year, but it takes a bit of time for things to pick up. It's picking up slowly, but taking its time. But on top of that, now we have the problem with the war in Ukraine, mm-hmm. because most of our tourists, they come from Europe. And with the war in Ukraine, so you can imagine, that has decreased the number of people coming to Mauritius as well. So it has been tough before, and with the COVID and with the war in Ukraine, it's getting tougher.
So the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and of course, the economic consequences of both of these are really making an impact on life in Mauritius. Now, let me ask you another challenge that you need to respond to on climate change, right? I mean, that is not going away. The climate is changing. Yeah. Seawater continues to challenge your coastlines.
Exactly.
Your infrastructure is continuously challenged by changing weather patterns, storms, and other developments. How do you, at this time when you see economic stress, also find resources and political leadership to respond to the climate challenge, which is a longer term and perhaps even more insidious challenge for all of us?
The SID countries or small countries, they can't solve the problem by themselves. We need the help of the international community. That's why I think the most important for us is for the commitment that has been taken by the big economies in the world. Okay, we have different COP meetings. A lot of promises have been made, but not much has materialized so far. Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's number one. If the developed economies promise something, I think they have to deliver. That's number one. And secondly, that's external. And the problem with this for the SID country is that, if tomorrow we said, okay, we managed to control the temperature to 1.5 degrees C or 2 degrees, whatever, in a few decades. But the problem with the SID is that the problem is going to persist. It's Correct. Not the day you reach 1.5, the problem disappears. No, it's just going to decay.
It's happening now.
It's happening now, and it's going to continue afterwards, mm-hmm. as well for decades, mm-hmm. afterwards. Mm-hmm. So the problem is going to be long term, and we need the commitment, and we need the financing as well. The financial support from the developed countries as well.
So in such a situation where you are dealing with economic downturn, loss of tourism, climate challenge, and requirement for large amounts of capital for investments in resilient infrastructure, what is the role of various actors that Mauritius engages with? For example, India, or for example, the Quad that talks about being a provider of services in the region, or for that matter, even Commonwealth, since you mentioned the SG's visit there.
Now Indonesia has a presidency for this year, India next year, and Brazil coming the year after. These are the three countries that has gone through tough time. Mm-hmm. They know how it is to go through a difficult time. Mm-hmm. And we feel, as well in the underdeveloped countries, that maybe we have got some good partners there in the presidency who can understand our problem. And they can help us to solve the problem in the long term.
Africa, since we are sitting in,
Yeah.
in Kigali, Rwanda, how do you see the Union play a role in the future in responding to many of these challenges?
Again, we had a meeting here in Kigali, I think about a month ago. It was a Commonwealth meeting about a month ago here. And I think that went very well. And the point was made, everybody made the point, how Africa would need help as well with a global challenge. But Africa has a many more problem as well, pressing problem as well. I think the African Union has played a very good part and is playing a very active part in trying to help in different ways and try to kind of expose the problems that we are facing and trying to talk to the major donors, trying to get financial help for the different countries in Africa as well.
This brings us to the close of this very interesting conversation with Vice Prime Minister Husnoo. He's laid out a clear agenda for the future, use the G20, the presidency by the emerging world for the benefit of the small island nations and other developing countries. We understand each other and we should use this global platform to serve the needs of each other. The second, of course, was his clear announcement and in fact an appeal of urgency for investing in resilient infrastructure in island nations, failing which we could see significant danger to the populations that inhabit these countries. Mauritius is just one of them, but many others require similar efforts going ahead. And finally, it's time to mobilize as a collective, the African Union, the Indian Ocean Islands and others, and work with Commonwealth and the Quad and other plurilateral and multilateral groups to create momentum to serve these objectives. Thank you, Vice Prime Minister Husnoo, for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation.